I think that a lot of my people, specifically being neurodivergent and having occasional struggles with focus and stuff, I feel like sometimes watching a very technical video is actually in some ways more confusing. So it kind of feels to me like if I'm listening to just the audio, I can just be undistracted, look at my screen, and just listen to someone beside me telling me the steps to take. Like there's no step that I missed. Like nothing is sped up. It's like in real time, you can follow it and do the stuff that I'm telling you to do.
All right, welcome back to our next case study episode. So excited to have Crystal Bantel here, one of our OGs, early adopter of Hello Audio. We featured you on our Success Story podcast. So excited to have you back and to kind of hear how you're currently using private podcasts in your business. Welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your business and your business model so people can get a sense of what you do?
Thank you. Yes, it's a delight to be here. And it's really cool coming full circle where I know I was on the previous success stories and it's cool to come back. So thank you. Yeah, so I am Crystal Bantel, your tech fairy. I am a website designer. That's kind of my baseline foundation. And that is what I've done several years. And I have also moved into some more business coaching and specifically mentoring people who are taking their practice or their business that is offline or brick and mortar, helping them to transition to the online world that is a little bit new and strange and scary for a lot of people. And specifically, I'm helping the business owners that are neurodivergent, autistic, have CPTSD, any chronic condition that kind of affects their energy levels and their emotional capacity. It's very inconsistent and fluctuates. And so it's a kind of a whole different world, a whole different dynamic for the way that, our brains work and everything. So I've just kind of transitioned into really catering to them and creating a safe space for them. So I have the web design, but that is kind of like I'll maybe take, a monthly project for that. But I've got my group coaching program now where I work with the CPTSD and neurodivergent business owners to start their email lists for starters.
Very cool. So this, I mean, I think this is interesting because you have done, and when especially when you first started using Hello Audio, you have a very technical business, and a lot of folks don't think about using audio when you're thinking about setting up tech or
Mm.
guiding people through technical things like
Yeah.
what you had started with. So I'm curious if you can take us back. I know I'm asking a little bit because it is an afternoon, but take us back a little when you first started, when you first heard about Hello Audio and thought of in this concept of private podcast. Why did you, or what kind of made you think, oh, this is great and my people need this, or I can use this in my business?
First of all, you guys sell it very well. That's so
Really? No, I said thank you. I appreciate that. we, we
Totally.
we believe in it. There is that.
yeah. Like I was trying to remember, okay, how did I hear? But honestly, I think it was just in some mutual Facebook groups, I think that we're in. I think I saw Lindsay posting about it herself. I don't think it was like through some type of grapevine. I think I heard about it
From
from
the
you
horse's
yourself.
mouth.
And it just seemed like a really
Yes.
exactly from the horse's mouth. And so yeah, so I was very enchanted by the idea of it being a podcast because I know how everybody knows what a podcast is. I was at the time an avid podcast listener, being like having young children. That was my way of staying sane and also just getting like just business knowledge. And I don't know, I was just eating it alive. I loved podcasts. And so my idea for it was essentially being a website designer. I was surprised by how many people would come to me needing a website or wanting me to build their course platform. And I found out that they didn't even have an email list started. And I'm like, I think we need to do this first. Let's take this back a little. I know it's really exciting. The idea, oh, I want to start a business and I need a website and I'm going to make a course. But the thing is, you need people to sell it to. So at the time, I didn't really want to make money on teaching them how to make an email list. I'm like, no, I want you guys to like set this up and then you can come and we'll build the website. So that was why I wanted that to be a free resource. So that was the idea in my head. But I will say the first founding members launch that you did, I was so involved and like, I was so there. And then eventually I let that kind of slip because I'm like, yeah, you know what? I wanted to avoid like the shiny object syndrome or whatever. And I knew that I wasn't quite prepared to record my podcast. So I decided, you know what? If they raise the price after this, which I know they will, like there will come a point where I'm ready and I will just pay whatever it is. Like it will be worth it when I pay for it at whatever time I come in. Well, very shortly thereafter, I don't remember how long, if it was weeks or a week or months or something, then you had another kind of founding members ish launch ish, like a second chance or something. And I jumped in at that time. I was like, yeah, okay, I'm in. I had the idea and this is happening. So kind of the starting out process for me. And that was, yeah, that was what, 4.5 years ago, I think.
It's been a hot minute. I think so. Question on when you first set up your first private podcast. And so you're walking people through your freebie, how to create and how to really grow your email list.
Mhm.
And you are very familiar, we're familiar with podcast listening. It also keeps me sane as a mom of teenagers. So it's with, yeah, even as they grow, the audio keeps just stays with you for sure. So I'm curious if your audience, because I'm guessing you probably have some audience members that aren't as familiar with podcasts or maybe weren't as avid podcast listeners as you were. Did you find when they adopted the private podcast or kind of got the concept that did you get feedback? Do you remember, or do you have any specific stories or feedback that maybe you got from your audience that maybe weren't used to listening to podcasts at the time?
Honestly, I don't know if I've ever gotten any negative feedback. Like, I do not recall anybody thinking this was difficult or anything. Like it's been pretty straightforward. And hey, it's only you click a button and it takes you to the podcast app. Even if you've never used it before, it still pops up for them. So the only feedback I've gotten is positive. Like I've gotten emails saying, "Oh my gosh!" Like actually, I'll read it to you. One very happy listener wrote this. She said, "Good evening. I don't know if you will actually get this email or not, but I just finished your How to Start Your Email List course. I'm so glad I got this from a bundle I purchased. I have set everything up and I have posted the freebie links and posts in a few places to start growing my email list. Thank you again for this great course." So in there, I'm not seeing that there was any problem with the podcast
That's
style.
awesome. And those kind of emails make your day, right? Because
Yeah,
people not only took the time and raised their hand and got the asset that you spent time, effort, energy,
right.
you poured your heart into creating, but they actually did it. They actually got it.
Yeah,
They had the time, you reduced the friction, they were able to listen to the content, and then you made it easier for them to take action, which whenever
yeah.
you take action, that's got to feel great when you get those kind of
Yeah.
emails.
And I mean, that's the cool thing about like my podcast really is a mini course, is what it is. It's not an ongoing one. Like I'm not keeping on adding to it. It's just, it lives as its own mini course, essentially taking people through the chronological click by click how to set up your email marketing platform, then how to build, how to prepare your freebie, how to build your landing page, how to automate the delivery of your freebie and automate the delivery of your nurture sequence. That is what the private podcast is. So the cool thing about that is it's the only reason you would have to listen to it is if you're planning to implement it. Like it was very no fluff. Like I did talk about why email marketing is important. I'm literally just targeting this is for the person that just actually wants to set it up right now. So then with that, I know that anybody that listens through it, like they're working through it because like, why would you sit and listen to step-by-step instructions otherwise? Right. So yeah, it's cool. It's a really good feeling.
I'm curious with the angle of it's very techy. How are people going through that content as they're listening? Are you providing videos that they can pop out? Are you providing screenshots or GIFs or something like that? How are you setting up the kind of over the shoulder walkthrough? Or is it not a specific, like, here's how to do an active campaign? I don't know. So I'm curious, like, your thoughts on the audio version, it being audio focused.
I think possibly knowing that it was going to be audio only is maybe what helped me to make it so incredibly step by step. I've had, I think, one person ever mentioned that, I wish, like I would rather watch this by video. And the thing is, yes, I mean, true, but this is a free resource. And once I turn it into a full video course, then it's paid, which it is now. I do have a paid version. With the full, all the visuals and everything. But it has seemed so far like the people that really wanted to implement it, they seem to have implemented it based on the feedback that I've gotten.
Yeah, it sounds like correct me if I'm wrong, but like my understanding it is that it's like a little bit more the like strategy because even if you're not walking through a Zapier connection or like a specific email provider, there's a lot of moving parts when
Mhm.
setting all of that up. And so to get that kind of handled, and then you point them to whatever help docs or whatever exists for those platforms. I think it's possible. What I love about it is like a lot of people like balk at the idea of something that's very techy being audio only. And so you're kind of saying, "Hey, it is like both." And I do offer maybe a more advanced version. So it sounds like there's either an upsell involved or something like that, but I think there is that some people do only need the like, "Hey, tell me what steps to do." And then, yeah, I'm in ConvertKit. I'll figure out how to do it specifically in ConvertKit or whatever. So that's at least, I don't know if you have any other thoughts or philosophies on setting it up like that, but that's how and I think that's really valuable. I think that can move people and it cuts the fluff that like other people like there's some people that don't need that and they literally just needed somebody to like say do this next, right?
Yeah, see, I think that a lot of my people, specifically being neurodivergent and having occasional struggles with focus and stuff, I feel like sometimes watching a very technical video is actually in some ways more confusing. Like, if there's a different upgraded version or something. So it kind of feels to me like if I'm listening to just the audio, I can just be undistracted, look at my screen and just listen to someone beside me telling me the steps to take, right? There's no step that I missed. Like nothing is sped up. It's in real time. Like you can follow it and do the stuff that I'm telling you to do. And I chose MailerLite as my platform that I'm teaching because I found that one to just be the most robust and the easiest for the price, being free. And so that allowed me to be very specific. I'm like, click the orange button at the top, and then you'll see this. And then when you see this, you'll click that, and then you'll change the color here. And you're like, every single move that they would need to make in the entire process from setting up your account on MailerLite all the way to having your nurture sequence done and starting your weekly emails. Like the whole, like every single step you need is in there.
I can see how, I mean, because we've all watched tech videos at some point in our
Yeah.
business careers where we've seen click here and you're kind of, and granted, if you've got multiple screens and have the luxury of that, it's like you can have one on
Yeah.
one screen and one on the other, but you're still going back and forth and it's still a
Yeah.
lot. And I can imagine, especially since you were so intentional about creating it with audio first in mind, meaning you were very intentional about describing it and making sure that you're describing the location and the color and the words on the button. Now, granted, I know that means you also have to keep things updated when the tech changes, which we all know is super fun because as the tech company, I know we just, changed our own user interface.
Right.
So like we have to change our help doc. So in the thing, it's a thing.
Yeah.
But I think I could absolutely see how that could be really beneficial to your audience because it is one voice, which is very intimate in your head. And you're not trying to, it is overstimulating to try to watch people on one screen and they're going at potentially, at least in my own experience, I feel like
Mhm.
the other person's always going at a different pace than
Yeah.
whether it's too fast or too slow. It just
Yeah.
never seems to be my pace, which can be overwhelming. And
Yeah.
I could absolutely see how this, even though it's technical and usually we think, oh, this is techie, maybe, audio, I can't see how it would work. But in this case, I think it absolutely works. And you've done such an intentional and purposeful job of making sure that it really fits your audience, which I really love that.
Yeah.
I can absolutely see how this would help people eliminate the noise and actually get it done. That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah. I wanted to attract the people that actually wanted to get it done. I think that anybody that is still fluffing around and kind of like, yeah, I should start an email list, but like, don't feel like it, but maybe I should just look into it a little bit. Like, it wouldn't really be interesting to them. I'm not teaching things. I'm not teaching philosophies and strategies really inside that private podcast. Like, I'm not giving them more stuff to ruminate on or whatever. It's either
Like
you do
decisions
it
to
or
make.
or it'll
Mhm.
be yeah,
Yeah.
you do the steps or it's gonna be useless to you eventually.
This is I love this. This is fascinating to use tech for or audio for techie things. So
Mhm.
I'm
I'm like, "Wait, do
curious.
we need one
I
for
know
Hello
that was
Audio?"
one of the private podcasts. I know, right? That's what I was like. Can we do this now that we have our
Yeah.
updated UI? We could totally do an audio
Yeah.
walkthrough. I'm curious, this is obviously one of the ways that you're using private podcasts. You had also mentioned you're using private podcasts for like replays of your coaching calls, which I
Right.
know I'm guessing like many folks that offer coaching, you probably have clients or customers that are in various time zones. And, even if we're all in the same time zone, it's very difficult for all of us to make the same time of a call, right? So I would assume, have you looked at And are you getting feedback from folks for your coaching call replays? Are you looking at the numbers who are consuming it? Or are you just getting feedback from folks? Is that something I know for me personally, I'm a lot more likely to listen to the audio than I am a video call, like a Zoom. Don't send me a Zoom replay. I'm not watching it. So I'm curious if your folks are the same.
Yeah, I will say that I haven't heard that they didn't like it, and it's handy. It's handy for them to be able to listen to them all in one,
True. They can binge it. Yeah.
yeah, you can binge listen through it, right? A video you would need to like sit down and feel like you need to watch it or whatever. I have myself often wished that the coaching calls that I am the coachee, I wish that I had, a feed where I could go and listen to all of that. I feel like I would be able to benefit from it more, actually. Another interesting ish, I guess, way that I've been using the private podcast is actually for my own, like, with that thought in mind, I started to take the audio from my coaching calls that I was the coachee, and I actually put it into a private podcast for myself so that I could listen to these things. Or if I was in some Zoom call and maybe I'm receiving a hot seat or something, I'd be able to record that portion and put it in there. And I called it Crystal Thought Box.
Love that.
Cute.
I would say my main thing is definitely that one free resource. That's the one that I'm seeing the most results or feedback or stats or whatever, which I am happy to share stats if you'd like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I went digging, of course, through my stats, and I found that 90.8% of the people who sign up for the free private podcast actually followed through and subscribed to the private podcast. So,
Nice.
like,
That's pretty
when
high.
if they go through with getting on my landing page, maybe reading through it, if it wasn't through a conversation with me where they already know they're getting it, they'll sign up. And 90.8% of the people that signed up on the landing page then would go in the email and actually subscribe, click the start listening button, and would go in and listen. And then of those people, 76% of those people actually began listening to the podcast. So, like, I can see how many people listen to episode 1 and 2 and 3 and so forth. I think you have 19 or something in there. So 76% of them actually began listening to the podcast. And about 50-ish percent, give or take, of those listeners who started seem to have gone through all the way to the end or mostly to the end or jumped around between the ones that they needed, is what it looked like. Because some of the numbers are a little up and a little down, mixed, scattered throughout as far as how many downloads there are per episode. But give or take 50-ish percent of the listeners that started listening went through, and I can only assume that those were the actual implementers of the podcast.
That's
That's pretty
impressive. I
good.
think that if you compare that to stats, right, of like a PDF download or something,
Yeah.
I know how many, sure, you're going to get even the best downloaded PDF, the most downloaded PDF. I'm guessing not many people actually will read it. It just goes in that download folder and it
Yeah,
goes to the graveyard of PDFs. But
yeah,
this is great.
yeah. They'll get the email and glance at it once and then
Mhm.
never remember where, like, it'll never pop up. It's somewhere in their
Yeah.
downloads folder, and I didn't pull it into some special folder where they can read.
That's
Like,
right.
yeah, PDF downloads, like, they just get lost in the graveyard of PDF guides,
It's true.
essentially.
Now, I'm curious for lead magnets specifically. The issue I see with a lot of folks that use lead magnets that are like a PDF, for example, is it's just not memorable. Meaning, sure, it could be a great value add, something quick that's
Mhm.
super valuable, but they're not necessarily going to associate your name and your brand with the value that you provided through
Yeah,
the lead magnet. And so the
sure.
next day or 2 days later, whenever you have that automation sequence set up and, you're emailing them, that person will sometimes see your brand or your email come through and be like, "Who is this?"
Yep.
Because they're not necessarily associating. But where I find audio kind of flips the script a bit is when
Mhm.
you do have folks that are engaging with you. And because audio, as we've talked about, is so memorable and so intimate, and
Yeah,
because you see such a high completion rate or a high engagement rate through these private podcasts using audio, is that it is more memorable, so
yeah.
that they then associate your brand or your name with someone who was able to help them achieve something that they wanted to achieve, right? That getting that value out of it. Have you noticed a difference in terms of your engagement rate post freebie? So the folks that end up hiring you or the folks that end up just hanging in your ecosystem, or, joining your coaching program, have you noticed folks coming from that, you just have a stronger connection with them?
Yeah. In fact, there's this one person in my email list that has been active since she downloaded the private podcast. She signed up for my private podcast on July 12th, 2021, which I believe is 3 years ago now, believe it or
Wow.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ancient history.
Right?
And she has replied to occasional emails to the present day. Even now, just a few weeks ago, I got another little
Wow.
update or whatever. She has not yet taken the leap to make a purchase, but it feels pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say too, like a lot of times with that kind of stuff is if someone's engaging, they might refer you, like you have no idea what's happening on the back end,
Yeah.
right? Because to me, somebody that like takes time to reply to an email is actually in some cases even a different type of person. And it could be a fan, but maybe not a buyer. And like fans are important
Mhm.
too, right? And so if they've gone through even your free content, it might
Yeah.
not be a line that they need what you're selling, but that doesn't mean they clearly don't like trust you or
Mhm.
engage with you. So I love that you're bringing up that because I think that's something that goes a lot more unrecognized because everyone wants like how much money did you make from this and less these connections that you're
Yeah.
fostering, which we really think is really important or happens often with the audio piece where someone feels like they know you, and when someone replies to an email it does feel like they
Yeah.
know you and they want you to know them, right? So I think that's like a cool highlight. I think that's different.
Yeah, and like it kind of reminds me of the one person that said, "I don't know if you'll actually read this email or not. I just want to tell you I love this."
Mhm.
People that are replying to you, they look up to you. Like they look up to you. Like when I reply to someone's email, like that is because I really do look up to them. Like I also feel like yeah, I don't know if they'll read my email, but this was
Mhm.
just so good and this thing spoke or whatever. And that is something I've been thinking of a lot recently too about the connection and fostering relationships with people in the free state. Like when they're not buying customers at the moment, but how important it is to actually build a relationship and nurture with them because without them there are no purchasers.
Mm.
Like there's nobody's gonna buy from you if you don't engage with them wholeheartedly, lovingly, generously before they become buyers.
So true. So true. Yeah. Every lead, every engagement matters. And
Yeah.
you're serving people with that free lead magnet, right? I think
Yeah.
and that might be all they need in the moment. And that's
Mhm.
great. Like that to me, that's a win for
Yeah.
everyone involved. And the fact that they can now refer because they got success from
Mhm.
that free thing that you offered and put out into the world, this asset that you created, they can then refer folks because you've
Yeah.
established that goodwill and you've established a reputation for being able to help them achieve what they need to achieve. I think that's important as well. So it may not be because Lindsay said, right? It's not just always about the money. Everyone
Mhm.
likes to talk about the numbers and the money, but the relationships to me, I mean, that's the cornerstone of business is
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, and I would say probably between 50 to 75% of my paying either clients or students, they have known me for a year or so before they made the purchase.
Wow. Yeah.
There's only a few, like it's more rare for me to get a client that is not a referral or has not followed me for quite some time already. So like the whole keep nurturing them is so very real for me. Knowing that like I may have my first interaction with this person now and they may download my private podcast or whatever freebie, but it'll likely be a year to a year and a half from now when they make the decision that they want to buy from me. And that's how I buy from people too. I buy from people after like a year of following them because I like at that point I know them so well. I'm so like interested in their stuff and I find them like, hey, I'm ready. Like, the next time I put out this offer, I'm ready. And I think that's just kind of how some of these brains work.
So true. Not to put you on the spot, but normally when we have folks in our space, in our ecosystem, been part of the private podcast world for a while, normally they're sitting on an idea or they've thought about maybe a new way or something that they could be using private podcasts for. Do you have something in your back pocket that you've been thinking about, or maybe a new way or something you want to test out with private podcasts, but you haven't had a chance yet?
That's a wonderful question. I actually came up with an idea during our talk here already.
Nice. Love when that
That
happens.
happens on
Yeah,
this
I was
show.
just thinking about the fact that it's a creative tool. But no, I'm actually thinking that So I have created a few what you could call a PDF guide, except I don't call them that because that's just so boring. I have something right now called a self-care menu for neurodivergent and CPTSD business owners to prevent burnout. And I think it's an incredibly fun and interesting thing I've made for free for people. And I feel like that would be really, really a great topic to put into a private podcast.
I think that's cool. I think
Yeah,
that could be a lot of fun.
I think so. And it's got like, I think I have 20 different ways. They're both classic and very unique, refreshing ideas for ways to prevent burnout. It's not just, go take a walk when you're overwhelmed, but there's other interesting things I've pulled in. One random weird one being to, when you're breathing deep, like basically yawn loudly or sigh loudly. And that does this vibration thing to your vagus nerve and it just really calms you down a ton. But there's just random cool little things in there that I just think are really amazing. And I think that should be a private podcast,
I
probably.
think that's cool. I think that's see, that's a unique way that, and it speaks directly to because your audience.
Mhm,
Especially in this space. We love the online business space, but it can be a
mhm.
little overwhelming at times.
Yeah.
And you're right. We, especially if you've got business owners, we kind of are sometimes looking for something beyond the go
Mhm.
take a walk or do a 5-minute meditation.
We already know that we should do those things, but what if you don't have energy to do those things? Like literally, I can know that I should go take a walk. All I need is fresh air and my brain will be clear. But what if I literally do not have the energy or even the emotional capacity to get myself out of either my weighted blanket or just my office chair to go out there? So then what else is there? Like I think that the classic ideas are amazing and I have a few of those sprinkled in there with a little fresh touch up, but I just felt like I think people just need some other ideas that feel more accessible in various ways. Even if it's something that's even crazier than going for a walk. Like maybe if you could go plant a little pot of herbs that you've got a seed packet waiting for, that for some reason feels more inspiring and more easy to do in the moment than to go outside for a walk for whatever reason. Like there's a whole spectrum of things that seem easy to a different person in a different frame of mind. So there's lots of ways to prevent that whole feeling of being burnt out and just not having any more energy to keep moving forward.
I know you mentioned at the beginning too, talking about the beginning of the episode, sharing your business and how you're pivoting a little bit. But it sounds like that
Mhm.
audience, the neurodivergent client that you have. And so you're kind of almost, it's like you're niching down to a type of person that you're serving, but you're changing maybe the business model of how you're serving them. I'm curious, like your thoughts,
Yeah.
as someone with ADHD myself, like how do you find audio in helping that population? And do you see private podcasts being a big part of serving that group of people? And I don't know if you have any thoughts on sharing that because I know there are a lot of either people listening who are CEOs who are neurodivergent, which is pretty common, I think, in entrepreneurship, but also folks that
Mhm.
like know that they're in the population of people that they serve. So if you have any thoughts as somebody who focuses on that group, how audio could potentially help that group.
Yeah, I think so. For me, accessibility is incredibly important. For example, in my group coaching program, the hub that I use, it's a searching hub. I have it as a prominent piece on my homepage where I say, like, how is this hub serving you? Is this working for your mind? Is there a different way that you need this material
Mm.
presented to you so that you can consume it better? Like, I'm very open about please give me feedback because I guarantee there are probably 10 different ways that all my people are consuming and are able to learn and so forth. And audio only is just one of those. I think I think it's imperative to have an audio only, because the thing is, like, I'll sometimes binge listen through something like 3 times before I'm ever ready to implement, maybe even 10 times, maybe even I'll listen through it for a year before I'm ready to actually do the thing. And yeah, some people need the video and some people need to read it. Some people need actively to have all three be available, and that's all fine. And I'm happy to provide, all three or more versions of how I present the materials because I just really want every person to feel catered to. I don't want anybody to feel like I can't learn this because I can't comprehend this because it's not in my learning style.
Awesome. That's great, Crystal. Yeah. So I was thinking too, as we wrap up, reaching the end of the episode, if there's anything that you want to leave people with as it relates to somebody who's super heavy on tech using audio. I think that's going to be really inspiring for a portion of our audience, or somebody who's looking to really actually launch that lead magnet and they want it to be private podcasts. I'm curious if you have any final thoughts around that.
Well, I do have some final thoughts that I wanted to share. I have found it to be very easy to share my private podcast as a lead magnet because it just feels more acceptable to talk about a private podcast instead of saying I have a freebie or a free resource or a lead magnet, because everybody knows then that, oh, you're just trying to get me on your email list, when yes, if you're interested in my stuff. But I don't know, it just feels smoother to be able to say, to answer someone's question, let's say in a Facebook group, if they're asking something and I know that my private podcast would exactly help them. It's so easy to say, I have a private podcast. If you want to, it takes you through those steps. If you want it, let me know. It's a much smoother way to go.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not trying to be tricky whatsoever, but I think it's just more, oh, now you're just trying to get me to DM you or something. And I'm genuinely not. Like, my strategy for sharing my private podcast is very much to be incredibly generous when I'm answering questions so that they would not need to DM me for more or whatever. Like,
Mm.
I give them the full load of the generous answer. And then I'll end it with, I do have a private podcast where I take you through the entire process of setting up your MailerLite. If that would be helpful to you, just let me know. I'm happy to share it. And I always sign off with love your tech fairy. Like, that's just how I sign off. Every single time when I answer like a long answer like that, I sign off with love your tech fairy. And that has actually gotten me a lot of people. They're like, oh my God, I need a tech fairy. But yeah, sharing, I would want to end with my thoughts to share with everyone or encourage everyone that having a private podcast as a lead magnet is potentially going to be incredibly effective because it's so much easier to share.
I don't think I've ever thought about it like that. Usually we get the opposite. Usually we get someone being like, how do you talk about it being a private podcast? Because people don't know what that is. And you're actually like, call it a private podcast. Maybe they have a follow up question because they don't know what it is, but it's not a lead magnet freebie, like, which feels like there's a bait and switch
Exactly.
happening, right? It's just a loaded term, or it comes with preconceived notions. We always say like marketers ruin everything. Really, I am trying to help you. I
Yeah, they
swear.
do.
And so if you remove that
Yep.
context, then the person is going in going like, "Oh, this person
Hmm.
is actually trying to help me." But yeah, I love that. I love the way that you frame that because I don't think we've ever
Exactly.
had anyone say it like that.
That's literally what you're doing. Yeah. Like, I'm not doing anything but giving them these step-by-step instructions. So I know for a fact that if they're struggling with how to set up their landing page, and I know that my podcast will take them through the steps of that, I can just say, I have this private podcast. People know what a podcast is. If you just put private in front of that, just sounds intriguing. Ooh, what's a
Mhm.
private podcast? It doesn't elicit, yeah, like the same reaction of like, oh, it's just another checklist or whatever.
I feel you. That's like the
That's
energy
true.
that we're coming in with, the knowledge, the skepticism that people have around email lists and giving out that information. It's
Mhm.
really valuable. You're basically saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
this is valuable and it's in a format that you're going to like. I care about you getting that result." And that's huge.
Yeah, and usually it's at the end of a post that is like, I've already helped them. I've already answered their question as to the best that I'm able to. So like, usually anybody that is signing up for this private podcast, they already trust me because I already gave them a really generous answer that they could have just ran with. But if they wanted to go deeper, then they can get the private podcast. So yeah, it's really cool just like being able to generously build trust. And then if they want to, they can also dive deeper into a private podcast.
I like that. And I think the other thing I will say is for anyone out there that's thinking, oh, but my audience thinks they associate podcasts with free. When you're
Mm.
really clear about the value that your private podcast delivers, whether it is a mini course, whether it is what is it going to help them achieve? Most free podcasts don't do that, right?
Yeah.
So the value really comes from the currency that your content is providing. So they're downloading, they're spending their time, even if it is free, they're
Mhm.
spending their time, they're giving you hopefully their primary email address, not the
Yeah.
throwaway one. But your content is providing something in exchange for that. And that's making sure you're really articulating that clearly is important as well. So thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that. That's important.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap this up by asking the question we ask all of our guests. So, and that question is, if you had a private podcast that had your life's ramblings, what would it be called?
Oh my. Maybe I already said the name. It might just be called Crystal's Thought Box.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go.
This isn't even a hypothetical question. Try again.
Right? It exists. We
Love
beat you guys
that.
to the punch.
But also maybe it's a reminder I should go and add to my thought box too.
Nice. Thanks, Crystal. That was super fun chatting with you. I love hearing all about your lead magnet success, and we wish you also the best with your business pivot. And we can't wait to hear how you're using audio in serving those future clients. So thank you for coming by.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.